Uso bem.
Okay.
Shall we do a short monologue opening? What do you think?
Yeah. So hello everyone. This is the Dharma Tea, and today we have a special guest, which is Bodhanidhi. He will talk a little bit about the Puja course of the Way of Water, level 1. He will be uh, offering this month. Is this month, right?
It's 1st of June, so actually it's going to start this Saturday.
Oh, good. Would you like to introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah, so I'm a student of Dharma since 2021. So the first training I attended was with Dharma in Rotterdam. In the same year, I moved to Costa Rica for a year to join the Kundalini Yoga retreats. That was like a 1-year retreat back then. And ever since, I've been studying with Dharma. So before that, I was into Dharma teachings too. I was like mostly doing self-study, figuring stuff out on my own. But then in 2021, I would say my study with Dharma started. So ever since, trying to deepen it. And then, of course, as you know, we had the training with Rami. You're part of it too. So yeah, like I would say like that. It could have been some kind of like a maturation phase, but I would say that the way of water hit me during that training a bit stronger than actually, I would say, the whole year of way of fire, though that might be reaching out too much, but still it made an impact on me. I think like maybe I feel like I have kind of like a religious approach to life. And I would say maybe that tantric approach of doing the puja allowed me to have this expression through the way of water and the puja. So I love it. I like to share it with people. So that's mostly like where the idea came from to organize this online course.
Good. So welcome to our Dharma Tea. So this is a gathering that we do once a week, every Monday at 4 p.m. to talk about our the struggles of the practice. And each gathering, Shiva Priya is the host, but today I am being the host because she's doing the translation. So I'm going to introduce myself. I am Shiva Nandini. I study with Dharma since I think 2017. I'm currently in the Acharya training program, and I am also practicing the way of water, which is a beautiful way of practice where we can express all our love and devotion. And as Bodhanidhi beautifully said, I think I also have this religious, ritualistic way of living. And I think this path is really beautiful and really heart-centered. And for people who are heart-centered and Enneagram numbers that are heart-centered also, it's a beautiful path of transformation and transforming the passions and the emotions into this beautiful devotion and virtue. And it's a path of transforming yourself into pure virtue, I would say. So today we're here to talk about this. And so, Bodhanidhi, how would you describe that this puja course is, who is directed to? Like, what kind of people would benefit from this?
Yeah, I think you said it yourself. I think like people who are mostly into the heart, like they really feel they can feel the teachings, have heart connections to the teachings, and have an easier time to feel emotions. Can really benefit from this. But also, I think people who want to transform their emotions. So a lot of people kind of like are like they have a lot of emotions. They almost don't know what to do with it. So I think like puja gives a very nice way to actually start transforming those, just because of the sheer fact that you learn how to relate to an icon of essence. So I think like we can transform ourselves very much by relating to people. This can be in a relationship, but then if you do it with an icon of essence, basically as something you look up to, you want to live up to it, be similar to it or the same of it, or you want to awaken the same qualities in yourself of that icon of essence. Well, you do that through puja by actually relating to them. So this can be your guru, this can be any lineage masters or the deities you're working with. So I felt that it was very transformative, especially because like it stays on your mind the whole time. With my own deity practice, I feel that just going through the motions of that ritual, doing the ritual myself, and also thinking deeply about the deity, because as people will learn actually in the puja course, there's a certain methodology to it. So if you go through the methodology, you start to kind of like integrate a whole approach to the tantric path that is much different than only direct paths. Like in meditation, you would that work directly with the mind. With Kulnat yoga, it's a bit broader, but then there's also like almost like a more individualistic approach to it, which is something that is less so in puja. So in puja, you learn to relate. And as you know, like Dharma Bodhi, he likes to say that Tantra is the path of relating. So you really express that through puja.
Perfect. So Bodhanidhi, before you all arrived here, he wanted to do a quick mandala opening. So if you still want to do that, since we are all here, maybe we can
Yeah, let's do that. That's a good idea. Just kind of like a quick visualization that we will to set the tone a bit, right? Let's do a simple mandala opening. So we can put our hands together at the heart. And we'll start with 3 ohms. Activating the 3 gates of body, speech, and mind. Fully centering. And if you're doing mandala practice or yogic practice, you can really invoke everything at once with this chant, with 3 ohms. So inhale. Let's strengthen the 3 centers of essence. So the white bindu at the head for the wisdom body, the blue bindu, the heart of compassion in the heart space, and then the red bindu at the base. Inhale. I'm. Blue bindu. Hurry. 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 The red bin at the base. Hurry. 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 So let's finish this up with also the Bijas for Ganesh, Saraswati, and the Gurus. Inhale for Ganesh. Om Gang Ganapataye Namaha. Om Gang Ganapataye Namaha. Om Gang Ganapataye Namaha. Saraswati. Om Aing Saraswatyay Namaha. Om Aing Saraswatyay Namaha. Om Aing Saraswatyay Namaha. Gurus. Om Aing Gurubhyo Namaha. Om Aing Gurubhyo Namaha. Om Aing Gurubhyo Namaha. And then Matsindranata. Om Shring Hring Machandanata Yanamaha. Om Shring Hring Machandanata Yanamaha. Om Shring Hring Machandanata Yanamaha. Cool, thank you. This is something you will do a lot in puja, chanting.
Okay, so for people who are not familiar with the way of water, would you give us, please, a quick overview of what is the way of water in a nutshell?
Yeah, for sure. So we got the teachings of the way of water during was it 2023, right, Sivanani? That was like last year. I'm really totally lost with these numbers. So it was January and February last year. And we got a introduction and actually a pretty complete teaching in puja, which is a very core practice in the way of water. So puja is not the same as way of water, but it's an aspect of way of water. And way of water is actually a way that we understand as a way of practice within the TMY tradition, where you follow what you could say the path of water. In this sense, the water that means kind of like working more with bhavana and emotions and relating, like I discussed before. So it's a path where you basically relate in a way through personal practice by performing a ritual, by running techniques such as Kriya Yoga, where you basically start to integrate yourself into a larger idea of cosmology. So we have, of course, the view in TMY, where we understand that there's a way to actually work back or work towards a recognition of our own essence. And in the way of water, that usually happens by working with directly with icons of essence, such as deities, such as the guru. So we mostly work there with, you could say, emotion, but also very much also like a view that we implement to really understand and bridge that gap and come to know our own nature. So, like I said, it's also a path of relating. So we do work also with the understanding that through relating, in this case, the icon of essence, that we can actually awaken these qualities in ourselves. And I would say also bhavana is a very important aspect of it. So actually in a very recent class that Dharma Bodhi also explained that according to Machandanata, who is our own root guru, is that bhavana, or actually actively changing our own state of mind, our own emotional disposition, we can achieve results much quicker in the tantras. So that's actually what we're really aiming at in the way of water, that we change our own emotional disposition, and through that actually really change our own, you could say, physiology, but also our own energy body to achieve the results of the tantras much quicker. In a nutshell, basically.
If we were to say that, of course, all the 5 ways work in all the 3 centers, but would you agree that the way of water, at least that's a little bit of my view, it's a path a little bit more, that gives a little bit more emphasis on the speech center? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, 100%. Because we chant so much, right? Like I think like I found during the training the chanting very transformative. Like the way we went through all these chants together around me in group. I think like you generate these waves in your own energy body that actually change you over time, and especially when you do it with a group. And I think that's also kind of like the beauty of the puja course and the whole system of puja, is that you learn a technology, but also a way to relate and create a certain kind of tantric culture, basically, in a group setting where you use symbols that everyone can relate to create like a group feeling. and also these same symbols, the same chants, and the same practices that everyone can relate to, which creates like a very much a certain momentum within groups. Of course, also for yourself, you use these practices also for yourself, but also translates into a larger group feeling and actually establishment of a group. So it creates a larger tantric culture. So I think like for people, even if they don't necessarily practice itself, it's quite important to understand kind of like the principles of puja, even if they wouldn't do this course, kind of like to understand what puja is about. It's kind of like so much in any tantric tradition, basically, in any sampradaya in India, in any lineage, there's an understanding of ritual. So it's quite important to understand, especially like people who feel connected to TMI or any other dharmic tradition, to understand what this is about, you know.
Perfect. I would personally say that in my experience, the way of water, it's very much speech centered, because not just because of the amount of chanting that we have to do that actually gives a deep effect on recalibrating our speech center, but because we are constantly dealing with, you already said, with the emotions, with the energy, like the Kriya Yoga practice that it's also included in the way of water. And all of those things are in the speech center, the emotions, the speech itself, the energy, the subtle energy. So I think it's a beautiful path of transformation. And for people who are heart-centered, let's say those people who have a lot of emotions, sometimes struggle with transforming those emotions, the emotional reactivity and so on, but also for the head cases that need to really build, strengthen that connection with the heart. So I think it's an antidote for the people who have a little bit of too much, and also an antidote for people who have too little. And it's interesting to see, to do like a self check-in, to see which center would be like your strongest one. Is it mind, speech, or body? And which one is the weakest? And sometimes, I don't know, for my personal case, I would say that speech is the most imbalanced, but in the same time is where I find my strength as a sadhaka, because where it's my deepest struggle, I find the biggest amount of energy to work with and to transform. So that's why I also love the way of water. So this course that you're giving of Puja Level 1, do we need to have any prerequisites to join it?
I would say it's always helpful to have an understanding of the lingo. So typically, like in any course, it's good to kind of like go through the preliminaries. People who have done foundations kind of like understand the foundations will kind of like have an easier time understanding what we're talking about, but also people who have a connection with Hindu mythology, for example, or actually have worked with Buddhist deities will have probably a step up. But I would say it's not going to be super easy if you have like no background in this, but any background will help. So it's like no worries, actually. I think like puja is like something you develop over many, many months and years. And it's basically a way to establish a certain tantric lifestyle in your own life. So kind of like if you look at it like that, and not something like you have to achieve and really get right in the beginning. Same goes with all the material, because you can make the puja very elaborate. But something I wouldn't really worry about. It's kind of like more setting up a more sacred space in your own house, having an altar and doing certain acts of devotion and appreciation for the lineage and the deities. I think if you approach it like that, I think like anyone can really join in.
So there's a question here, like, what is puja? How would you describe that for people who have no idea what it is?
Puja is an understanding of ritual, in a sense that actually you start to work with an understanding of cosmology. So I think it's important to understand that this science is never really broken off from a larger understanding of the world. So in Eastern Dharma traditions, there is understanding that there are certain laws of nature that work in much larger universal scales. And people have basically figured out that this goes back a lot. And this is something that repeats in every culture, the fact that people make use of ritual. Actually saw it also in Brazil. Like I went in Vitória, there's like an old cathedral, I think, like on the mountain. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about. So I went there actually with Durga Murti. I went there up the mountain. I was walking and I saw like how everyone there was actually leaving offerings next to the roads. It was very interesting because it's very cool actually to see. And you can, I think, see this in any culture that people try to relate with a larger picture of themselves through certain actions. And puja is not much different. So it's a way to relate to a larger sense of life through ritual action. And what you do is that, according to this view of puja, that you understand the larger cosmology and that you try to act that cosmology out in our own human bodily form. So actually, every action that we do during puja, it has a certain module in larger structures in the cosmos, you could say. So we make use of cosmology. So for example, in Tantra cosmology is that we understand that there's some kind of like interplay between Shiva and Shakti that give rise to larger and larger patterns of universe that actually expands and creates the universe as we know it. And so to emulate that in our own being and to harmonize with these patterns, we act out certain ritual actions, which actually have a correspondence with the idea that actually we have of cosmology. And of course, this has grown over many, many millennia, probably. It goes back very old. Like in Vedic times, they would work with forces of nature. And then when Tantra came into the picture, people started to use more and more this ritual technology to work with deities that have more relevance to our own spiritual development. So this is a way to actually purify ourselves by working with cosmology and certain symbols that we can work with, and that actually lead to a certain kind of like a purification of our own, not only like our own body, but also our energy body, but also our mind. We purify a lot. And like you said, with the chanting a lot, it always goes with chanting, because we chant into being these mantras, you could say, or the shlokas that the rishis have found and have interpreted. So we basically act the whole thing out.
Perfect. And in your course, what exactly, if you could talk a little bit about the curricula, like what are you going to teach on it? And sorry, there is one question that came up in the chat. So someone is asking, Flora is asking, if in your course, are you going to teach one class or more classes about cosmology, or are you going to water it down through the whole course?
No, I think like I will spend a lot of time. So each class will be 3 hours, and I will spend really a lot of time to fleshing it out. And I think puja, and you might feel the same, that puja actually really works if you have an understanding of what you're doing. So even kind of like what I explained just before might sound a bit hyperbolic, but actually it's very practical. Especially people who have a background with Tantra, they know that we work with 5 elements. We understand that our own energy body is composed by 5 elements. And if you have a way to work with them, you can actually balance them and harmonize them. So we mostly work with certain ritual actions that purify and harmonize these 5 elements in our body through working with the senses. But it's important, I think, to kind of like backtrack this whole view of like what we were doing with ritual, why we're doing it that way, and what the tantric understanding is of cosmology. So this actually translates into action. So we will definitely go into that.
So could you talk a little bit more about the whole curriculum of the course?
So the first two classes will be a large introduction, and then very soon we'll go into the ritual itself. The ritual itself starts with preliminaries. There's an understanding that if we do ritual as a practitioner, that we go through a small purification ceremony for ourselves. So there's an understanding of etiquette, but also purification of our own body. So we basically are ready to worship a deity because we revere these deities, and we have to kind of like have an understanding of ourselves as someone who is worthy enough to actually worship the deity. So there's an understanding and a whole actually preliminary practice where we set up the whole scene, not only of ourselves, so the environment around us, but also backtrack it by purifying also our own body with water, but also our own energy body. And when that whole thing is set up, we will go into what's called the understanding of the 16 offerings. So in Indian traditions, you have different pro formas to do the ritual action. So what we will learn in this course is, besides the 16, we will also learn a 5 offering course and 5 offering pro forma. But the larger pro forma that we will learn and that we will work on the largest bulk of this course is the 16 offerings. So we will do multiple rounds of this until people have an idea what it means. Start with it in skeletal form, so people have kind of like a larger idea of what it means, and then flesh it out with each session.
Perfect. So if we could describe a fruit for those practices, if a practitioner is looking for the fruit in each practice he or she perform, what would you say that it is the fruit or the fruits of the puja or the ritual practices, deity yoga?
So puja is more of kind of like what we'd call an outer level of practice, where we start with the idea of discipline. You can think of this kind of like almost like a discipline that we go through. But this is not to put it down. Actually, this can actually lead, if done in a proper way, to very high results. In fact, so much so that actually within what we call the outer structure of the puja, we go very much in, very fast, deep, and we also make use of mantra practice. So also in this course, by the way, we will discuss mantra practice as we have learned from Dharma mostly. So it's kind of hard to say what is the result of puja, because it's like, how do you do your puja? So it's very much dependent on the person itself. But the promise is almost kind of like that through doing this practice, you actually reflect the qualities of the deities within. It is understood that the deity actually starts from your own continuum. So you're actually kind of like almost worshipping, but then again, the word worship is not necessarily correct. We don't try to think of it as dualistic. We try to bring out certain qualities from our own continuum, which we understand as a Sambhogakaya deity. We interact with it, we give certain offerings to it. So through this offering and action that we do, we start to refine our own sense of our own senses, of our own elements, and through this action, purify it. So to begin with, I think like it causes a very deep rectification of the practitioner, a certain kind of like rectification of our own awareness and how we approach life. And then deeper results might be that actually you start to gain the fruit of the deity yoga through many months and years of practice, is that actually the qualities of the deity start to reflect in yourself, the virtue qualities of the deity, and also we start to transform very deeply our own emotions, basically. So that is actually mostly what it's about. During the puja, you will actually act out. It's almost like bringing out the scene to life, almost like a theater, and you act out a certain interaction with the deity. And this alone is very transformative and can help to, I would say, like very fast results. I have benefited a lot from it. It's almost like I felt like this was like the missing key in my practice to really kind of like fully live it, you know. It's a long process, but like it really helps, I think.
So we are looking for avesha, which is a Sanskrit word for to enter. So for the deity to enter into us, we could say that. But we are also, as yogis and yoginis, looking for some avesha, which is also when we are reaching up. So in avesha, sorry, my hands are full of paint. So in avesha, the deity is coming down into us, and in samavesha, we are also going up. So in this process of deity yoga, of worship through the puja, we are actually purifying our negative emotions, our non-virtuous actions, and we are taking in the icon of essence, taking it in, like becoming more and more like this deity that we choose to work with also in the when this practice is unfolding, right? So at some point, are you going to when people start doing your course of Puja level 1, are they starting immediately with one deity? Are you recommending one deity for the person, or the person can choose whatever deity they think they feel more attracted to?
There's an understanding within the lineage that Dharma has also given us, is that there's a way to work in a progressional way with deities, where actually you use the qualities of the deities to refine your own energy body. So this is an approach to deity yoga. And actually, we'll see this happen in a lot of other traditions. For example, in the Shriviya traditions, I think you work with more than 100 deities. It's kind of like the idea that there's a mandala of the deity, and that's through refining and working with more and more deities, you come closer and closer to the core to experience then the full fruit of the deity yoga. This in a more like skeletal form also exists in our own tradition. So there's an idea, for example, that you work with Shambhunatha first, with the Shiva, or maybe more with the Shiva deity, the idea of Shiva, and then refine it with Shambhunatha, and then the Durga, for example, and there are different levels of deities even beyond that actually have a deeper impact or more refined impact on your own self. But there's also the understanding that if you really want to reach that samavesha that you have described, that interpretation of the energy body of the deity and yourself, that the practitioner actually has to go very deep with one particular deity. In India, they call it the Ishtadevata, or like the deity, the chosen deity of kind of like your heart's desire. And there are other ways to do it too. For example, Dharma sometimes initiates people into the Dashamahavidyas, where through a certain ritual, the deity chooses you. So different ways to go about this, but it is kind of like understood that to go very deep in deity yoga, the terrorist has to be kind of like a one-on-one match that goes very strong and actually creates this whole fusion, basically, of the practitioner and the deity. So the qualities of the deities and the enlightened nature of the deity can actually be understood as the enlightened nature of the practitioner itself. So that's actually what we're aiming at.
So how long is this course going to last?
It's going to take 9 Saturdays. So 9 classes of 3 hours. I think the whole month of June will be full. In July, I will teach, I think, 2 Saturdays or 3 Saturdays. I have to check again. And then again in 2 days in August. 9 in total.
And do we need to buy any gear to do the course, or can we start with things that we can find in our city or place, or do we have to buy everything from India?
Yeah, that's kind of like a thing, right? Because I had a lot of trouble in Belgium finding some stuff. I had to look online myself personally. I was kind of surprised that during the training, people found these huge kumbhas. It was kind of like funny, like they actually brought these whole big kumbhas to the training. I think it's kind of like too much. You can really start it very minimalistic. That's actually what I did. I had these plastic cups that I was using to actually learn the hand motions. And I think that in the beginning, it's very important to just learn the actions. And then over many months, over many years, you can build your whole puja set. And I believe personally, I wouldn't go cheap on that. If you really want to make the way of water or puja your thing, you should make it as beautiful as possible. And also, there should be kind of like a feeling of it being rich. So I would kind of like slowly build over months and years your whole puja set. I'm sending out the lists of things people can buy once they register. So to have an idea. But then again, exactly like what I said is like you don't have to have everything in the beginning. You can actually act things out in the beginning with things you find in your kitchen, for example. So I wouldn't go too crazy about it.
Good. For Brazilians who are not experts on the English language, I heard, but I want to check if it's accurate, that there will be translation to Portuguese if we have enough Portuguese speakers signing up for the course. Is that correct?
100%. So Shambudas will do the translation. If enough people sign up, you will definitely have the translation. And Shambudas is also very talented in puja himself. And then he did the training with us. He was in our own group. So he has an understanding of puja. So he'll do a real good job with translating. I have no doubt. So if enough people kind of like show up from the Brazilians, if they want to join, for sure, we can do that.
If anyone else has any question about the course, you can please send it in the chat box. Se alguém mais tiver alguma dúvida. Shiva Priya, I think you are frozen.
He's been frozen, yeah.
She's back. So there is a question from Flora. Is this course the first from a series of courses? Like, will you repeat this course, or is this one and only opportunity?
You will have more opportunities, so don't be sad if you couldn't join. This is actually almost like a tryout, I would say. Not that it will lack in any quality because I will 100% do my best, but since this is kind of like the first course that will be offered after we had our training, and this will kind of like be a figuring out process of actually organizing the training well enough. And it won't lack anything, so I will give the full thing. I will try to give the full thing and also be as true be true to the science as much as possible, just like Rami Shivan has taught us the puja, and also the view teachings around it that Dharma Bodhi has given. But there is basically restructuring happening, we could say, of TMY that kind of like we will turn into a model where more and more cohorts will be available in the future. It will follow a certain sequence of level 1, level 2, level 3. And the same will apply to puja, level 1, level 2, level 3. So if you join this puja, you will definitely have a leg up. But the idea is that actually you will continue, not only myself, of course, but also Shivanandani, Vajradakini teaches puja too. And I'm not sure if there is anyone else, Hunsara, I think too. Could be. I'm not really sure if he wants to actually. There's an idea of a progression within the TMI system where you go through the courses, and the same will apply for puja, but also other classes.
So will this course of Puja Level 1 give any certification for participants, or is there like a test that you have to take to be certified, and what this certification means?
So this puja course is purely for your own self-practice. If you go through this puja, you will have the basis to do your own self-practice. Though, of course, this gives a basis for being certified for doing public pujas, but also a larger program where people can go through to become teachers themselves. Of course, this follows the general the flow of the school, where we will, especially Saja, I think Saja is organizing it, and then this will kind of like be brought out where people can go through these courses. But yeah, there's definitely possibility for people to get certified to become pujaris in their own rights over time. So yeah, that's definitely possible in the future. Actually, also, so when people go through this course, of course, if they want to get certified, there's also certain standards of level of competency. And there's a possibility of people to kind of like check in with the teachers that are right now here in our school to kind of like live up to that. So private classes can be, for example, arranged where people go through feedback sessions, or for example, pronunciation, or even how they do the puja themselves. So over time, they can actually get certified if they wish so.
Yeah, I guess that responds Jamie's question. He wrote here, does this course give you authorization to perform public pujas? So I guess that's the right answer. It's definitely a start. I guess you couldn't do the public pujas without doing a level 1 puja course, but to do public pujas, as Guruji was talking to us in our meetings when Buddha was putting together the whole pro forma for the course, the public puja is like a way on itself, right? It's like a profession, and you really would have to be 100% dedicated to that and really dive deep into the practice, into the rituals, into the trainings. And I guess the level 3 that Guruji was mentioning for the way of water could only happen in person. So I'm crossing my fingers so we can have more trainings on rituals and puja. And as Jamie's here, I would like to ask you a question, Buddha, and if Jamie wants to answer with you, I don't know. So we are starting the Body of Light healing program as well. And the puja course, it's like one of the trainings that it's in sign of the Body of Light healing, just like other rituals. And could you talk a little bit about that? Like, why would the puja course be a good indication for people who want to go through the Body of Light healing program as well? And how those two paths come together?
Maybe Jamie can add to this because he might know the curriculum of the Body of Lights more than me. But actually goes a bit back to your previous question of like, what is puja? It's kind of like that's for any effect to have place, it's really good to ritualize your own intention. So in that sense, puja is very much also about intention and about the desire to affect a certain result in the world. Puja, like we will learn in this course, is very much geared towards an understanding of having the effect of coming closer to the deity you're worshiping. But this also goes for other desires or other goals too. This could also be healing. So for example, to effect very good healing, it's very good that there's a container of a puja where you do certain ritual actions to create this environmental container where the intention of a person, of the healer, or of the group actually follows through. So in that sense, the pujas, that's actually also the basis for using ritual for other purposes too, such as healing. I don't know if you have something to add to that, Jamie.
The only thing is kind of just my like perspective on it. I would say that it's to help kind of develop your own self-power. Like if you're getting more in touch with your deity, I know that later in the Body of Light, I believe would work with the deity as well. So I think now it's just kind of, that's one of the important things, like developing that relationship with the deity, like you're saying, but then also your own self-power through doing this. Because I think a big part of Body of Light healing is developing your own self-power. I mean, Dharma mentioned, if you have a certain strength, but then you meet something else with a bigger strength, it's gonna like knock you out. So yeah, I think that's a very important part. And I think you mentioned as well that but yeah, you can't be a good healer unless you have a certain amount of your own power, right? And I think it's yeah, my 2 cents.
And I guess also a big part of the way of water, especially the puja rituals, it's about purification of the self. Because as Bodhanidhi said, the whole first section before you start any ritual, there's simple or as complex and elaborate as you want preliminaries of purification of the self. So the whole, I would say in my experience, this whole deity yoga also, it's been a lot about purification and purifying my body, speech, mind, my actions, everything, my thoughts, through the ritual practices and through the integration practices that comes with the rituals, with this way of living, ritualistic. And I guess for the body of light healing, the purification is a big thing, and the protection, because to be protected is to be also purified. Because if you're not purified, your body, your mind, your energy, your environment, you're gonna attract all kinds of spirits, diseases, and etc. So to develop a skill on ritual, on purification, on intention, on your own personal Shakti, also with the mantra sadhana as well. I think it's a beautiful way to purify and to be protected in the sacred mandala as well. And especially when we talk about disease, a lot of the ancient times view was that the diseases could be possessions, all kinds of possessions by spirits and etc. So I guess that purification and that protection is a very good ally when you're following that path.
100%. Is the deity yoga too, like what Jamie said, also like that on top of the protection and the purification, is that the healing is more effective when you do it as a healing deity. So it goes together with the puja, right? So to actually imbibe the qualities of the healing deity, it works very, very well with the puja itself. So only for that is really very good.
So, Buddha, how would you explain the self-arising awareness beings, the deities, in a more non-dual perspective? Because some people struggle, and I've had this discussion with many people, with the non-dual view as the absolute non-dual view, and how do we work with deities as mystical beings flying around in the sky and coming to help us, like saints or angels? How would you rectify the view for people that want to hold both absolute non-dual but also the dual? And the ultimate non-dual is not rejecting the dual, right?
Kind of like you put me on the spot here, because it's kind of like a very I find still a very difficult thing to wrap my own mind around. The cool thing is about the puja is that kind of like is that actually it allows that view of working with the deity in a dual way, although we essentially understand in our school, in our view, that that we share, all of us, a non-dual base. But that's the beauty about it, because if all of us share this, rather have this non-dual base out of which we arise, is that actually we can work with beings such as sabs, they called sabs, self-awareness, self-arising awareness beings, that have their full enlightened nature. So as we understand in puja, we work with these enlightened beings that through their enlightened nature, through relating to them and seeing, actually using them as kind of like a mirror, that we can actually see that reflection in ourselves. We can do that exactly because they're enlightened, and we're searching kind of like for that same reflection in ourselves. We work also kind of like with an idea of trance, that actually we get in a certain way, a little bit like possessed by the deity. but that actually means that actually the qualities of the deity start to work in ourselves. So there's almost kind of like this interplay between the fact that the deity is a deity and I am myself. And there's always kind of like the fact that in that sense, we are separate. But since we share the same qualities of having the base, and out of the base that these essential qualities arise, is that actually by relating to a deity who already has this self-arising nature, spontaneously arising, that we can have the same understanding in ourselves. So that's kind of like why we work with these deities, if I could put it in a nutshell.
And what is the difference between working with a enlightened deity, like a self-arising awareness being, than working with a non-enlightened deity? Like, I don't know. Like I'll give you an example. For here in Brazil, we have many spiritual traditions that work with non-enlightened beings possessing you, and you worship them, and then they give you something in return, something like Santeria, Candomblé, Umbanda. And what would you say that's the difference between working with those kinds of beings and working with subs?
Mm-hmm. It's very much about the goal that we want, because the ultimate goal that we want in our own spiritual development is knowing our true nature. And since deities that kind of like are being worked with in other traditions, according to our view, are understood as not having that full embodiment of their own enlightened nature, there's always going to be a fracture if you try to kind of like approach them. They always kind of like have this kind of like a fracture of a diffraction into a view that actually is not in accord with having that full understanding of our own freedom. So we do not very much want to have this kind of like an approach where we work with the deity to get a certain results, material result, although this can actually be part of it. But we want to, in this mode of practice, you want to mostly search for the enlightened quality of the deity itself. So kind of like have a more direct approach by using the qualities of the deities, because each deity is understood to have like different qualities. So we don't have the idea of like that each deity, since each deity arises from the same base, that ultimately they're the same. The base might be the same, but kind of like that they have the different qualities, and we try to work with that. So I'm not really familiar with for example, the traditions in Brazil, for example, how they work with it, but it's kind of like it's almost understood to be kind of like a dead end path. I don't know if you could add something to that, because you're kind of like a bit more familiar with the whole culture around.
And something that's interesting that Guruji always talks about, that you never work with a deity, a god or goddess that needs you to worship them. So when we are doing the ritual, the puja, the homa, we are offering all kinds of things. We are offering water, flowers, jewelry, incense, but we are not doing it for them. We are doing it for us. We are doing because we need to do those offerings to rectify our 5 elements, to put ourselves in that bhavana, and etc., etc. So when we are working with enlightened beings, I would say that's a good thing to look at also. They don't need to be worshipped. Their only motivation is to support and help us to uncover our true nature. As for other types of deities or spirits, we could say that need to be worshipped, we have to be extra careful for them.
There's also the question of karma, right? Because like if you would worship deities who are not enlightened, you're actually entangling yourself into more this whole samsaric cycle of like being stuck in this karmic net. You're actually trying to do the opposite, because like the sabs are understood as to be full of compassion, and out of that compassion they basically arise out of the base to help us self-deliberate. So that's where we kind of like that, seeking that self-liberation more than certain goals or like material desires and stuff like that.
We have a question here from Wagner. Will there be classes about deities iconography? I mean, how it can help us to tune into the deity we are working with?
Yeah, I think that's very important. I think like it really helps to bring the deity yoga into fruition much more. It's kind of cool if you think about it, because like if we talk about a deity that's spontaneously arising and one with their nature, full of compassion, like why would they even have a body? Like we have this iconography. But of course, it's kind of like a way to, on our own human level, to purposefully relate to this icon of essence in a way that we can understand, but also it speaks to a deeper side of our own being that actually responds well to symbology. So kind of like this almost needs like a meditative awareness and a lot of practice to actually pierce through. That's why I think like we will definitely go into the symbology of deities, the iconography, because using that iconography and meditating on it, I think brings the deity yoga, makes the deity yoga much stronger.
Once I asked Guruji on a car ride because I was struggling with understanding this whole non-dual, dual thing of deities spontaneously arising. I was like, why do they have a body? Why Kali has this iconography while Bhuvaneshwari has another one, and blah blah blah. And he gave me a simple answer. He was like, because we need it. Would you understand if there was just a ball of light floating around? I was like, they appear like this out of compassion because our brains, our beings, the humans understand it better, the iconography, the symbols, and everything, so that they appear like that. The base energy, Sambhogakaya, organize itself in this form of a so-called body, light body of the deity, so we can understand it.
Mhm.
So it's all out of compassion. We
For
have
sure.
another question in the chat, and Ingrid has also a question. So Jamie, with subs, I'm sure Dharma mentioned that when there are no more beings suffering, they resolve back to essence. Yes. Perfect. And
There's also
Ingrid,
the idea, if I can add to that, like there's also the idea that actually the deities are basically the making of humans themselves. It's kind of like interesting to actually think about. I don't think it's super relevant for your own personal practice, but if you can kind of like hypothesize and philosophize about it, it's kind of like, yeah, if there are no humans, why would these deities actually be here if there are no suffering beings? So it's very much their own benefits. Kind of like also goes back to that previous discussion of like, since these beings are so selfless and only exist for our own benefit, these are actually the beings that are worth working with, right?
Ingrid.
Não, minha pergunta é bem rápida e simples. Eu só queria saber se esse curso é pré-requisito para o Body Light of Healing, se é um pré-requisito.
So her question is if the Puja Level 1 course is one of the prerequisites for the Body of Light Healing Program.
I actually don't know. Do you know, Jamie?
I seem to remember we talked about it, but I don't have a definite answer. I can't fully remember. I don't know.
So it's definitely help. I mean, it's like
I wouldn't say that
Yeah.
is a prerequisite, but I definitely saw that it's in the curriculum of the Body of Light Healing, if I am not
at some
making it
point
up.
we thought, yeah, I think it will be.
Yeah, let me I'll make a note and I'll speak to Sava Prem. I'm sure she'll know, and then I can let someone know. Let Ingrid know, or whoever else wants to know.
Actually, I would like to add something about the iconography of deities. In tantric work, we work on all levels, right? Like, so we also work on the level of the body, which is very important. So like, do you have like we have a transcendental view, but also an embodied view. We try to kind of like, we actually merge both ideas and we try to embody both the transcendental, but also the embodiment. So it's a way for us to relate, but also kind of like to imbibe these qualities and have a way to envision almost, but also feel the qualities of the deities, of how they would be if we would be embodied. And that's also why there are bhavana practices in higher levels of yoga, where you actually transform into the form of the deity. So you actually visualize yourself as the deity as is represented in the iconography. So that kind of like bridges that gap of like the transcendental, the more like the Samokaya view of the deity, and how it would be if you would actually embody the deity in daily life. So that's also quite important.
Yeah, if I could add something about the puja and the deity yoga, it's everything you said and giving an emphasis on the relational part. So it's exactly like having a relationship with a non-corporeal being. And it's actually present not only when you're doing the ritual, but if you're doing the practice correctly, you will have your deity with you at all times. And in our path, we have this progression on relating to the deities. So in the first level of the practice, you would relate to the deity as a master, and you are her or his servant, like, or slave. And then you are always keeping that in mind all the time during your day. With every person you encounter, you have that as a second attention in your heart. And then in the second phase, you have to correct me if I'm wrong, okay, Boda? In the second phase, you go towards teacher-student. So that deity becomes your teacher and you become his student. So you are growing more intimacy into that relationship with that being by becoming closer and closer to her or his energy body as well. And then you take a step further and then you become more like a close friend to the deity, and then you take a step further, and then you become like mother and daughter or father and daughter with the deity. And then you go further and then you become lovers with the deity. So you have this sexual, romantic relationship with your deity. And then in the ultimate level, you become your deity. You become her or him, embody the deity. And then what's the name of the title again? Is the Vidyadhara, when you achieve that level of
Yeah, holding the wisdom of the deity, being the Vidyadhara, for sure. I think like if I understand correctly, that you actually apply that word for this thing, but for sure, like the idea is like actually there's like this transition into the direct result of the deity practice, that actually understand the enlightened nature of the deity to be yours. Same. But I like what you actually add to this, because there's definitely a progressional approach to deity yoga. It's not just like one practice that you do puja, it's kind of like you have this idea of like how you self-relate to the deity and grow to a certain not only spiritual, but like very much a psychological approach to this whole practice, where you start to purify yourself. The way you look at the deity first as kind of like your master, that will purify you on one level. Next thing is like you see the deity as your guru, again, that will purify you on a certain level. So you go deeper and deeper like that. So it's very important to actually also have that in mind when you practice it yourself.
We have a comment on the chat box from Wagner. It's not a question, but just a support message. I am more a mind-driven person, so I struggle a lot for about 6 to 8 months to understand what I was doing with my daily puja practice. But I would say that by doing it, I was building my own devotion and confidence in the tradition and practice. So if someone is doubting about to do this course since they are not very emotional, I would say that they should go for it. Of course, it's a journey. The fact that I didn't give up was what helped me. Yes, perfect. As I was saying, for the head cases, for people who are not very heart-centered, is a beautiful antidote because it can build your connection to your speech center, to your heart. It can help you with the devotion, which the devotion can be a path by itself. If you have a perfected devotion, you for sure won't need any other practice. But we struggle a lot with devotion, so that's why we need sadhana.
Dharma also says like devotion rectifies a lot, right? Like even if it's like it's more important than the technicality of practice. There's maybe something also that's important to add is because puja can be so technical, is that actually sometimes it's gonna be kind of like almost like a block for many people. I felt that block, but I went through that technical phase by really studying a lot and practicing a lot. And then once I went over that bump, then I started to really enjoy that practice. But I feel people, well, it's a bit hard. On the one hand, you have to learn the technicalities of the path. And so it's kind of like maybe where the head cases get bogged down a bit more. Even it's kind of like we want the opposite, but they get bogged down more. But yeah, this is like a balance. I think like everyone has to find for themselves, right? Like even just sitting still and touching the heart by meditating can sometimes do much more than for your own devotion than going through a whole puja sequence. So I think like it's a figuring out process and also it needs time. I don't know about you guys after the training, but I definitely went through this almost very technical phase of like learning the whole performa by heart. And it's like once I got it by heart, then I started to enjoy it. Then you got to start like playing with it, you know?
Yes, just like my art teacher always said to me, you have to master the technique to be able to subvert it and to transform it into actual art. So
Yeah.
everybody thinks that because Puja, Ramiji, our teacher, always says that Puja is an art form. So of course there's the performa, there's the technique, there's the correct pronunciation, but in the end, it has to come from your heart. It has to be filled with your bhavana. It has to be pouring your being into it. But to be able to do that, you have to master the technique because otherwise it's gonna be a shit show. So like any other artist, we have to go deep in the technique to after be able to make art. I relate a lot to what you said. My pujas could only flow into this beautiful place after I knew everything by heart, after I studied a lot of the technique. So I agree 100%. And Jamie is asking here, will you teach Nyasa/Kavachan? What does this mean for your relationship with the deity?
So nyasa means placing of certain energies on the body. So actually, I think like literally it means placement. Do you know the literal meaning, Shivanandi, of nyasa? No, I think it might mean something like placement. Kavacha means armor.
I will research while you explain.
Yeah, so these are actually basically mantric practices where we put the mandala or the energy body of the deity into our own body. So that actually means that we put the whole world in the deity, start to map it on our own body. So we use different body parts to then associate different mantra qualities of the energy body of the deity so we can transform our own body. And yes, I love it a lot myself. We can do nyasa. It's very cool. I think it's like also a great way to, when you're short of time, to really have a strong effect of your own deity in your own energy body. It's much more direct, I think, also than a longer, elaborate puja. But also doing it long enough, you'll start to really reinterpret your own body as not only a body of like flesh, bones, and skin, but actually as an energetic phenomenon that reverberates through the energy body of the deity. So it's a very cool practice. Deposit-based planting. Makes sense.
Yes, and also to work with the non-dual understanding. You first have to become the deity, and then because everything that you're doing in the ritual, it's to make an imprint on your unconscious mind. So when you do the nyasa, you're placing the deity in your body. So you can enter the practice as the deity, doing the ritual to the deity as well. And you will see when you learn the puja that when we invoke the deity, we visualize the deity in our heart space, and then we breathe it out through our nostrils into a flower. So the deity is actually coming from our hearts. That doesn't mean that we are creating the deity, because the deity is already existing, but it gives you a deeper connection with the non-dual view that you're not actually separated. You come from the same base. You come, yeah.
I found, by the way, Nyasa also pretty cool as a standalone practice. I think in India, they have this understanding that you really map up the whole world of the deity on your own body, which has a very profound effect. So, like Shivani said, it's like there's also the understanding that we have to be the quality of the deity to worship the deity. But also as a standalone practice, I think you can take Nyasa pretty far. But I think it's like you'll learn a very basic version in the puja, but in your own personal practice, you can go really very far. So it becomes kind of like a mantric practice, just as you would do with your main mula mantra, so the core mantra. And then you build your whole thing basically with Nyasa, Kavacha. What else you have? Argala, I think, or I know is of that part. What do you have, Jamie? Like, for example, in the Devi Mahatmyam or the Chandi Path, pro forma, you can have like the Kavacha. There was something else too.
I can't remember. I think
Yeah.
it's just Kavacham. Yeah. I don't know. I was actually I was gonna type you a question as you asked me this, but
Yeah,
I
there's like
can't.
the Kavacha, you have the Arga, and then you also have like actually chanting the whole story of the mythological deity, story of the deity. Maybe that's also kind of like helpful to mention because um, it's kind of like when we go for the later stages of the path where we really try to undermine the karmic expression we have in the world, we try to undermine our own karmas, is it's very important that we learn how to live in a world where there's no real certainty. Kind of like, as Dharma says, from a square world, we go into a round world where there's nothing really to hold on to. I think like Deity Yoga is very helpful for this because we try to live in a certain world where we almost like put everything into question. But since this can almost turn to a very schizophrenic thing if you don't have the right support of guru, lineage, and masters, is that actually by living in almost like a mythological world of the deity, which you can teach yourself by exactly doing all these practices, the pujas, but also the nyasas, but also learning the mythological story of the deity, is that you basically learn to live in a new world. You're still in this world, but not like of it, like they say in the biblical terms. So you live kind of like in a flowy, round world where you fully show up still because we try to embody the data. Of course, you fully show up in daily life, but you're kind of like different in that sense if you really push the data yoga.
We are kind of a little bit over our time, but I would just like to add a little something that it's fascinates me a lot about the rituals, the tantric rituals, is that it puts us with a deep synchronization with the cycles of time, and that's very beautiful. One of the biggest parts of the ritual is the sankalpa, where you set the time, the place, the space, and your intention for the rituals. So in the ancient times, also the rituals, they were very much used to put our individual self in sync with the macrocosmic cycles. And I think that's a very beautiful thing, because when you start doing the rituals, you get really in in sync with those bigger cycles of time and astrological cycles and everything. Is he going to teach Nyasa in the course or not? I didn't understand. I guess yes.
A basic form of Nyasa you will go through, yeah.
Okay, so if we don't have any more questions, we are 18 minutes over our time.
Cool, that was nice.
Once, twice. Okay, it was very nice to have you in our Dharma tea today. I personally saw the pro forma of this course, and it's very deep, very, very deep. It's very organized, and I would definitely do it if I haven't done anything before, but I will do it anyway again.
You'll be
It's very deep, very understanding, and very complete course. And I hope to see you all there. Jamie saying that Dharma Sanskrit course is as good as a prereq. Yeah.
That's a good one to do. Yeah, Dharma is a course, exactly, of Sanskrit pronunciation. It's a good one to do.
And there's Wagner typed in the chat. The tantric view is that we have the whole universe in our body. One of the meanings of it is that our body is the whole mandala deities. Nyasa, I think, is a way to wake it up. Of course, we are moving our awareness inwards, and the mantra that we put is that pure energy.
Kind of like bridging that to the non-dual view, for sure. Yeah.
Perfect. So thank you very much, Bodhanidhi. We see you really soon. And thank you, everyone. Thank you, Shiva Priya, for organizing this every Monday. And we see you on the next Monday.
Thank you for having me, guys. It was really fun to talk to you guys. Ciao, ciao.
Ciao, ciao.